Hello and welcome to another episode of Caesar and Sartre. I think this is the fifth episode. Um, Today we're going to be talking about nihilism. Um, I don't have this might be a bit less structured of an episode than it sometimes is because nihilism is just it refers to so many different things. Um, so my plan here was to go over the different kinds of nihilism, and then we can talk about whatever interests us, and go from there. Um, does that sound good?
Sure.
Alrighty. Well, I guess I'll get into it. I don't think I had any other announcements, not that I know of. Oh, I didn't say the opening line, which is "Welcome to Caesar and Sartre," where two scholars um, what is it? I've already forgotten. Where two scholars talk at the intersections of their fields, classics and philosophy. I think that's what it was. I should write this down. All right. Now that that's out of the way. So the word nihilism comes from Latin, and you know this, of course. But is it pronounced nihil?
Nihil.
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 As a wonderful Elden Ring boss would say, somebody in the audience will get this one day. Nihil. Sorry.
Um. So yeah, nihil meaning nothing. Um, so you'll come across this Latin phrase ex nihilo, out of nothing. Um, and yeah, that's the etymology of it.
It's also where the English word nil comes from.
Nil, yes. Um, Now, as for definitions, again, it's kind of hard to give a definition because so many different people call themselves nihilists, but I have a couple here to get us started. So, according to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, um, nihilism is a belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. It is often associated with extreme pessimism and a radical skepticism that condemns existence. A true nihilist would believe in nothing, have no loyalties, and have no purpose other than perhaps an impulse to destroy. While few philosophers would claim to be nihilists, nihilism is most often associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, who argued that its corrosive effects would eventually destroy all moral, religious, and metaphysical convictions and precipitate the greatest crisis in human history. Whereas the Wikipedia gives a similar definition. I mean, it says nihilism encompasses various views that reject certain aspects of existence. There have been different nihilist positions, including the view that life is meaningless, that moral values are baseless, that knowledge is impossible. These views span various branches of philosophy, including ethics, value theory, epistemology, and metaphysics. Nihilism is often characterized as a broad cultural phenomenon or historical movement that pervades modernity in the Western world. So, like I said, we'll just go through this list here. The first kind, and you can jump in at any time, but the first kind of nihilism we'll talk about is existential nihilism, which I think is often what people, when they hear the word nihilism, that's usually what people think. Now, existential nihilism, of course, says life has no inherent meaning or purpose to it. I actually have a quote here. I should specify, I'm not a very religious person, but one of my favorite books in the Bible is probably Ecclesiastes. And so the beginning of Ecclesiastes, I mean, the whole book kind of has almost like a nihilist tinge to it, but the beginning
Vanity, vanity,
says,
all is vanity.
yeah, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, vanity of vanities, said the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor when he taketh under the sun, which he taketh under the sun? One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. So, basically, why, we toil on earth, we're born, we work, we die, nothing really changes. It's just the great cycle of existence. And I'm pretty sure, I think later on in Ecclesiastes, I don't have that quote in front of me, I just pulled the first 4 lines, but I think it even mentions like, we can't even profit from our wealth because we die before we can use it, and then our wealth gets passed on to the next generation. So yeah, like I said, I appreciate that book. So, and there are different ways that philosophers have responded to this idea that life has no inherent meaning or purpose. As the first definition mentioned, of course, Nietzsche is associated with this. And I think this is where his idea of the transvaluation of all values comes in, and the idea of the a higher man, an overman, because our old values are failing us basically, and we're on Nietzsche's view, which I think is more or less correct, probably even to this day, we're falling into a pattern of like not believing in anything, and so we need people brave enough, bold enough to make their own values, to embrace life more fully. Because this is like what Jordan Peterson will attack Nietzsche for. He's like, you can't create your own values, Bucko. But that's like one. I love doing a Jordan Peterson impression, but that's one way of like dealing with this question, is just saying, well, we got to create our own values, which is sort of what the existentialists take on. Like, there's debate, and is Nietzsche an existentialist? I mean, he was sort of a precursor at the very least. I don't think the term was really around when he was writing, but so when you have thinkers like Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, in our podcast name, like, they have this idea. Well, Sartre has this idea of like radical freedom, like because he has this line, we were never as free as under the German occupation, which is like seems paradoxical, right? Germany invaded France, and it's like, well, obviously that's not. Obviously, they weren't free under the German occupation, right? But he's making a different point, which is, even if there's like even if there's constraints on you, external constraints, you still have the ability to make choices, make free choices. You still have the ability to I guess, to be the captain of your ship, to quote that poem that's become a cliche now. But there's always the ability to make choices. There's always the ability to, and that you should consider yourself responsible for your life. Like, you can't blame your parents. You can't blame society. It is
very Petersonian.
Well,
clean your room, Bucko.
You say Sartre sounds Petersonian?
That particular claim, you got the can't blame your parents. Gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Gotta clean your room.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, I think it is I guess it's a logical conclusion to, again, like this existentialist idea. There's no God, life is not inherently meaningful, and so we're just specks in the universe, and I think existentialists generally see this as a bad thing. Like, this is horrifying. What are we supposed to do? This is a horrible predicament. And in that sense, like, well, the horrible predicament is just solved, at least in Sartre's view, by just acting out in the world. And so another option for you, if someone's not a fan of existentialism, is absurdism, associated with like someone like Albert Camus, who's probably one of my favorite writers of all time. the main difference between an existentialist and an absurdist is the absurdist wants us to look at the meaninglessness of life head on and just live anyway. Whereas with the existentialist suggesting that we need to create meaning ourselves, someone like Camus saw that as like just putting a Band-Aid on a wound without actually taking care of the wound itself. So like you could be, an existentialist could say, well, I want to go to church because Christianity brings meaning to me, even if it's not cosmically true. Or I'm going to like try to live out this philosophy because it has meaning for me. And yeah, so that is one, not necessarily a bad way to deal with existential nihilism, but it is. But again, from the absurdist perspective, you're just kind of ignoring the problem, kind of like getting drunk, basically, rather than solving whatever psychological ills you have. And
The early
so,
absurdists are pretty influenced by theater, right? The sort of the notion that we're all like, the whole world's a stage to be the most cliche meta theatrical person ever, but like the idea that we all just kind of like act out roles without like real like meaning behind any of it.
that's a good question. I'm actually not super familiar with that. I mean, I know Camus was involved in the theater. He wrote a famous play about Caligula, actually. Fun fact. And I think the idea of the play is roughly, Caligula just deals with the meaninglessness of life, basically by dehumanizing himself and being super cruel and a bastard. Which I guess, again, another way to deal with the meaninglessness of life, just be an asshole. Not a great way, but a way. No, that's a good question. I'll have to look into the connection between absurdism and theater. And I think I did want to add with the existentialists, another famous phrase about them is existence precedes essence, which relates to the idea of radical freedom. Like if you look at a hammer, there's a essence to it. Like we know roughly what a hammer is used for. You look at a person, that's not the case. We don't necessarily know what a person is used for. And so because because we're just born, but without like being for anything or having being a tool for something, just further solidifies the point that then we're just ultimately free to make our decisions and to build and to create ourselves, basically. So that's existential nihilism. I don't know if you have many thoughts on that.
Second. No, I have to hop up there. Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
I don't know. The absurdist nihilist position. I know there has to be a connection there with theater, although I'm not sure where it's at. But there's definitely like a connection because like I mean you get somebody like Lionel Abel, whose book I have right now, but who like talks about like how theater kind of used to represent some kind of a form. It's hard to phrase, but like there's a theater was designed to like show you something that you can like not believe exists, but there the fourth wall, very important to the theatrical process. um, and kind of the breakdown of that is kind of an absurdist thing. It puts all of the actions of the characters in a very different perspective when they're capable of understanding themselves as being in a play and looking at the audience and interacting with them in that sort of way. Um, it,
So, well, at least I pulled up the Wikipedia article on theater of the absurd. It was a post World War II movement. It's designated for particular plays of absurdist fiction. Um, Plays focus largely on ideas of existentialism and express what happens when human
yeah,
existence lacks meaning or purpose and communication breaks down. The structure
right.
of the plays is typically a round shape with the finishing point the same as the starting point. Logical construction and argument gives way to irrational and illogical speech, and to the ultimate conclusion, silence. So what that makes me think of is Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett's play.
I think
If
I've
you know,
heard of that.
if you're familiar.
I don't
Well,
know a lot
I mean,
about it, but
it's basically. I mean, I'm not spoiling too much. It's just these two guys standing at a bus stop waiting for someone named Godot who never comes.
I'm a classicist. You know I don't believe in spoiling things.
Um,
Half of the things I read tell you the plot in the first 5 minutes, and then you watch the play.
so yeah, I mean, I guess I could see like the absurdity reflected in. Well, these two guys, they're waiting for someone who's not coming, and they're just forced to talk amongst themselves about whatever,
Yeah.
and while the hours away. Um, that would be interesting. Actually, maybe we could do an episode someday on the theater of the absurd.
There's a really well the reason I bring it up, there's like a of course there's a whole sort of sub movement in like in the philology of classical theater, and especially dealing with comedy, but to a lesser extent tragedy, but mostly dealing with comedy and like analyzing it in modern meta theatrical terms, and because like something you see a lot. There's a very like one of the things I think really distinguishes both Attic old comedy and Roman comedy is like the from the tragedians is that it frequently directly addresses the audience in ways that tragedy does not. Tragedy does to some extent with the chorales and things, but it's not quite so aggressive. Like the characters will just randomly break out of character in the middle of a play at Plautus, and they'll just start they'll start talking about like tropes in comedy, as though that's a thing that exists inside their world and they know it, and it's really weird. Like they'll be like, yeah, this is like now if there's any of there's this one line in the Curculio where like I mean, really, there's a whole passage in the Curculio where, like, of course, the play is supposed to be set in Epidaurus in Greece, but then the Corregos, the costume manager, comes out like midway through the play with a completely unnecessary diatribe on the morals of the Romans at the Forum, and he never specifies that he's broken out of Epidaurus. Is very feels very absurdist, but but he just starts talking about like the Forum, and he's like, yeah, and then there's and like archaeological excavations in the past few decades have confirmed that a lot of the things that he's actually pointing out are exactly where they are. So he clearly is actually talking about the Forum. There's all kinds of interesting stuff with that. I'm off on a diatribe, but I just think it's funny. The sort of there's all for most of Western theater, there's always kind of been this sort of absurdist tinge to it, uh, and this is kind of I think one of the primary ways that Plautus engages with Menander, because Menander brings the tragic idea of like the stage is separate from the audience into comedy in a lot of ways. Like he almost never has his characters interact with the audience at all. He's like, yeah, I want to show like morality plays and like this. it's basically idealized, Greek family life, and Plautus takes that material and then he destabilizes everything that makes it unique. He makes the moralizing characters whore themselves. He makes all of the all of the good morals that are supposed to be communicated by uh, the plays. They kind of all break down. And you get these weird scenes with like where he takes a scene from the Bacchides where two men who have they think that they've been like one of them thinks the other one has been with his girlfriend, but it turns out it's just two chicks who have the same name. But um, but like the in the in D Sex Apaton, the Menandrian play that it's taken from, the characters are very naturalistic in their dialogue. It's really interesting. Like they're like, but like it's like a kind of faux naturalism where like the conflict is resolved in a way that doesn't actually make that much sense. Like they just kind of like they talk it out in a way that a moralizer would want you to talk such a thing out, but that doesn't really represent human life. And in Plautus's version of the same scene, he has them like speaking all of the confused and contradictory thoughts out, both to the audience and ultimately to one another. Whenever the sort of parallelism breaks down, it's really fascinating. But anyway, I'm just going off. I love absurdism in theater, so that's why. But
No, that makes sense. I'm reminded of. I think this is from Sophocles. From you probably know which play it's from, if it is from
oh,
Sophocles.
probably not. I don't do Sophocles, but
Well, because you were mentioning absurdism in Greek theater. What it made me think of was the line about, and I think some people will use this line to point out the Greeks might not have been as optimistic as they're portrayed sometimes in culture. But the first best thing is to have never been born. The second best thing is to
oh
die.
yeah, right.
Which I
Yes.
mean that kind of that verges on antinatalism, but there's something kind of nihilistic about that. Like there's something
Yeah,
something bad about living. There's something bad about existing, and it would be better to have never existed. Um,
right.
so
Yeah,
I'm sure.
that's from Dionysus Tutor, whose name escapes me at the moment. But yeah, that particular line is pretty influential to Nietzsche.
Yes, and so I'm. You could probably draw like, um, if you go across like or throughout words hard. If you look at the history of Western civilization, and I'm sure non-Western civilizations as well, people will bump up against this idea of the meaninglessness of things.
Right.
The other thing it made me think of while we're talking about art in general is um, like Dadaism, the anti-establishment
Right.
movement in among artists. Critical of reason, critical of logic and technology. Um, One of their more famous pieces of work, of course, is it called Fountainhead, where it's just the urinal who's turned into a fountain. Um,
I don't know if I'm familiar with that one.
um, but I think it. Let's see. Oh, it was just called Fountain. Excuse me, I was getting Ayn Rand's novel confused, but the fountain. It's a turning an object that you wouldn't consider part of art into um, an artistic piece. I might be a bit too modernist to appreciate some Dadaism, but it's another example of subversion, which is sort of at the heart, I think, of nihilism in a lot of ways. Um, you have these cultural ideas that people take for granted, and then you have someone who comes along and say, no, that's nonsense. I'm going to go do this other thing.
Right.
Well, I guess we could move on to moral nihilism. You might like this. So moral nihilism, also known as amoralism or error theory. I'll explain why they call it error theory in a second.
Yeah.
This is a meta-ethical theory that rejects the existence of moral facts. So the moral nihilist believes that moral language refers to potential facts, but the facts which are being referred to simply don't exist, and this makes all moral claims false. And this does contrast with something like expressivism, which expressivism just says, like, if I say, torture is wrong, I'm just saying, boo, I don't like torture. Or I'm just expressing some intention to, act against any government policies that involve torture. So it's a different approach to moral language, basically. It's a question of is moral language is it trying to refer to like properties in the world, or is it just reflecting our emotions? I think the Australian philosopher J.L. Mackie is pretty famous for his moral nihilism. I guess the main thing I have to say about moral nihilism is I think I go back and forth on whether I prefer expressivism or moral nihilism, and I haven't decided.
What is the difference between moral nihilism and moral anti-realism?
So I think it's more or less. Moral nihilism is a kind of moral anti-realism, as is expressivism. It's just like I said, it's a disagreement about what moral language is doing or referring to.
Right. I think we had this conversation before.
I think we have, yeah. Now, some moral nihilists will still say, moral language is a good tool. We can keep using it. We don't have to necessarily give it up. Although some moral nihilists might say we should give up moral language altogether. But that ultimately, if we do retain it for like the purpose of a tool or something, we just got to recognize, okay, we're talking about false truth claims.
Right.
And I think some people are probably alarmed by something like moral nihilism, or probably even moral anti-realism in general, which I don't think is the most popular position among moral philosophers, according to statistics.
It's not.
I'll have to double check on that. But, because this seems very counterintuitive in a lot of ways. I think we often talk as if, moral facts exist.
Right.
And, going back to this idea, I guess, of morality as a tool, we talk about, we're using moral language every day, and we're making moral judgments and distinctions every day. If you watch the news or just amongst your friends and family. So it is like kind of built into our human nature, I guess.
Yeah. It's worth noting that we're not even the only species that exhibits like moral behavior. There's plenty of other
that's actually
related and even unrelated species. It seems like it's just a fact of being a social animal in some sense. We kind of can't. We both can't really find morals like out there in the universe. Unless you cling to some idea of God or something, but like there's not really like a way to demonstrate them existing outside of us. But it's also like it's the only way we can make sense of how we live in society. It's a conundrum.
Yeah, well, you took the words right out of my mouth, actually. But So yeah, I mean, I guess I could explain a little bit why I'm partial to just moral anti-realism in general. I mean, uh, 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 so like, if morality comes from what I suspect it comes from, that Will just mentioned, the evolution of social animals and the need for social groups to have a certain like code or have a way of running so the group doesn't break down. Like ants. If there's an ant hoarding food in the ant colony, the ant will be ejected from the colony and die. That's a kind of quasi or proto morality. I mean, it's not an abstract.
Ant.
It's not an abstract system, but it is a I guess behavioral reinforcement. And then so there's that. If we're starting with that, then I think it's difficult to see where moral facts come from because,
Right.
and I mean, Will knows this. We pretty much agree on this, but because it doesn't necessarily mean like with our evolved traits, that we didn't necessarily evolve to get at truth or to understand the universe. Now we it seems like we can understand some aspects of the universe, so I guess we got lucky there. But we're not evolved to be these like perfect philosophers or perfect scientists or something. And so if these moral intuitions or moral feelings just come from the needs of the hour, then that seems to call into question, at least for me, the idea that we're grasping at some external truth. On top of the fact that, I think Mackey talks about this as well. So there's the argument from queerness, not queerness in the sense of like homosexuality, but the queerness in the sense of like if there are moral facts or properties out there, they're not like any other facts or properties that we know of. They're not like the facts of physics, or they're not like the facts of economics or something. They would be kind of special things. And there don't seem to be those special properties, out there. And it seems, you could argue it seems kind of absurd almost that those properties would come into existence since they are so different from the properties we find in the natural world. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of a ramble, but yeah, like I said, I'm not really sure if I prefer nihilism or expressivism. Maybe I guess the issue with error theory is, as I said, it seems like we do use kind of it seems like moral language does refer to something, and so that could be an issue for the error theorist. But I don't know. Some people also say with expressivism that they can't account for conditional statements, like conditional moral statements. So if I say, I don't know, if I say it is wrong for Will to steal bread, then it is wrong for everyone to steal bread. Some people say, well, that seems very different than boo torture. And like, how do you navigate that difficulty, if it is a difficulty? So yeah, I maybe there's not much else to say on this matter.
Yeah, I fall pretty firmly in the anti-realist camp, as you know, but I don't really know if I'm deep enough into the philosophy on it to concretely put myself into any one of the subgroups that fall under that. They all seem to have their kind of problems, and it made as often I resort to when discussing philosophy, I do often feel that their distinctions are more based in language than anything. which is like, okay, I mean, language, much like morals, is endemic to us. It's just kind of it doesn't mean anything outside of what we say. So
Well, I mean, I would, I would disagree with that to some extent, but I mean, I don't think the expressivist error
oh,
theory.
you're a linguistic realist. You're gonna tell me now that there are language facts in the universe?
No, no, I just meant I wouldn't boil a lot of these philosophical disagreements to just word games. Word games don't help, or word or semantic disputes don't help. But like I said, I mean, if you talk about moral language, error theorists and expressivists have a genuine disagreement about what moral language is. Like that's not. I don't think that's that is a genuine like conceptual impasse rather than just the same thing under a different name. That was just my point about that. Um,
Careful, we're gonna get talking about mereology again.
I mean, I didn't have that in my notes, but I can bring it up. Hopefully,
Mereological nihilism.
oh, I mean, we can. I mean, we can talk about it now, I guess, if we want to.
Nothing. Everything is nothing.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead. I didn't have my notes on this, but I know it enough to talk about it off the cuff. So, meteorological nihilism, something Will and I have talked about and gotten into some heated arguments about as to what like its usefulness. But it's basically the idea um, that complex or composite objects do not exist. So the example I think we were using in our discussion, like a table, it seems like it has legs. It has like the surface you're using to write on or using to put your laptop on. So it seems to be made of parts. And the meteorological nihilist says, well, that's just an illusion. It looks like a table is something that's made of parts, but really it's just a collection of what they call meteorological sums shaped table-wise. Um, so, and there is also sometimes a distinction made. So Peter Van Inwagen, I'm not sympathetic to this perspective, by the way, but Peter Van Inwagen holds to something called organicism, which says there are no composite objects except for living organisms. So humans and frogs and fungi are composite objects, potentially. Well, maybe not fungi, but like frogs and Homo sapiens are composite objects. But tables and chairs and buildings are not composite objects.
Okay.
Now, I'm not.
Interrogating that position.
Yeah.
What would his position? Is a tree real then? Is a tree a composite object, or is that not because it's not a species? Because like a Thomist, right? A Thomist, in their mereological perspective, would say that trees are real because it's like a thing that we can identify. Which they're
Um,
almost close to like
well, I
Platonic
mean,
forms theory, but
I think trees are. I mean, trees are living organisms, so I think they would
yeah,
fall.
but would they? But like, is a tree a composite object, or is a specific species of tree a composite object? Like, does it have to be, or is it like each individual organism is only one composite object? How does that work?
So, as I
Is there a
understand,
thing that's called a tree?
on the organicist view,
Yeah, yeah. From an
I,
organic, not from your perspective.
I don't think on an organicist view. I mean, they're really talking about like.
Is it just like every individual organism is a composite object? I
I,
would
I,
assume that's the
I believe that
perspective.
is
I'm just
the.
clarifying.
I believe that is the argument. I don't think it's so
Okay,
much
yeah.
species are composite objects, but the individual organisms themselves are composite objects.
I was just clarifying because you did say trees and frogs and humans, which I was like, well, those aren't really like distinct things, right? Like there's like a million kinds of frogs, but anyway, sorry.
Well, sure, but there could be a
Kind of an asinine question.
Um, I mean, there could be a million kinds of living organisms, and each of them could still be a composite object, if you see what I
Okay.
mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really see. I mean, this isn't a deep. This isn't like a super sophisticated philosophical objection. I don't really see why we would need to make that distinction. I mean, I guess the idea is, well, it seems like living organisms are more complex than tables and chairs because they have organs, they have, maybe they have a skeleton, muscles, or they have an exoskeleton. Like, so I guess maybe it's supposed to be a reflection of just what it looks like. A big differences between organic and inorganic objects. But if mereological nihilism is true, I don't see why organic objects could not also just be
Right.
mereological, some shaped in the form of trees and frogs and humans.
That perspective feels almost spiritualist to me. Like you need to have an external explanation for why organic organic objects, specimens are themselves are composite, but other things aren't. Like that doesn't really make any sense to me. Like, okay, here's a thought, right? Like, is a beehive composite, right? Because like I would suspect an organicist would say no, because it's made up of a bunch of individual bees, but like they basically act as a unified organism. Like that's how bees act, right? Like they and similarly like an ant colony, right? Ants don't work generally for themselves. They will they act very much like cells in an organism. You know, unruly ants are killed by other ants like a lysosome almost. Like it's very or like white blood cells might target a cancer cell. It's very the way hive organisms act is very similar to how like a whole specimen would act. They just do it as individual organisms from our perspective. So I guess I'm not really. I don't really see how you could like make that distinction.
I mean, I think that might be a slightly different topic in a way. I mean, that sort of thing gets into like social ontology, like for like eight philosophers will talk about this, like what are group agents, or are there group agents as opposed to just individual agents, which we generally like think of it when we talk about agents.
Sure,
I
sure,
guess
but
what I'm
like within this perspective, though, I think you could like make a pretty compelling argument that that is just one unified object, right?
the
I
beehive.
struggle to I struggle to see how you. What my point is, I struggle to see how you could distinguish between like an entire colony of ants or bees and like a single organism of like something else that is not quite that doesn't operate that way, right? Like you social animals like ants and bees are like they really go beyond the bounds of what we generally think of as animal social structures and more like kind of like an organism together. So I don't really see like how you could say that that's a bunch of little tiny specimens as opposed to a whole. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to think about that more. I guess what I'm thinking, uh, my response in the moment is, well, I think like to take an ant colony, I think what you're saying, the collection of ants specifically could be an organic. It could be a
Right. Yeah.
composite
The
object.
colony would
Like
comprise an organic
because
unit.
there's the material that the colony is made of is inorganic matter.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. It's about
that wouldn't be part of the composite object. Um, I don't know actually. I don't know how an organicist would respond to that. I think the hang up I guess
read
I
any like
have.
those medieval philosophical tracts where like you have like a fake argument with somebody. like you imagine what the person with that perspective would say. You write that down, then you go to the next one, the next one, and the next one. And you just keep like running down until the end and like have a fake colloquy. I love those. Those are so fucking funny.
Writing philosophical dialogues is fun. I have done it.
Yeah.
But I guess one more point on the organicist idea is, I mean, if we take the idea, as I think modern scientists do believe, that organic organisms did just come out of, or that there was some shift at some point for whatever reason, we're not really sure, between inorganic matter and organic matter.
Right.
So there might have been, like an intermediary stage where there was we might categorize it as kind of inorganic, but kind of organic at the same time. So anyway, I guess because you mentioned it almost sounds spiritual. I mean, I think if we're orthodox materialists about it, well, or organic, living organisms are just, again, collections of matter. And if collections of matter are just mereological sums, then again, I don't see why we need the distinction at all between
Right. Yeah.
tables
That was
teeth.
kind of that was kind of what got me off on that subject to begin with. I was just like, I think it's kind of a bizarre distinction to make if you're going to be a mereological nihilist. I don't know how you like take that and say, well, but aside from organic things, because like to my brain that's special. That's that is kind of how it rings to me. It's like it seems like a discomfort with the reality that like if you accept that everything is just mereological sums, then like you kind of have to say the same thing about organics, unless you have a kind of external, almost spiritual perspective on the nature of organisms. I don't really know how you can reconcile that. Like, yeah, I mean, they act kind of different than other stuff looks, but I mean, they also act different from one another, right? Like, I mean, we're not really like, um, that's another question I would have for the for an organicist, like in the same vein, right? Okay, leaving aside ants and bees, because in some sense you could see how like somebody could see those as like a bunch of individual organisms. I would struggle to really reconcile that, but like okay, but what about like colonial unicellular organisms like algae and slime molds, which often act
Mhm.
exactly like slime molds, especially like a colony of algae. Like okay, sure, but like slime molds literally like move around often, like an organism. But like theoretically, it is a bunch of little tiny organisms. Like they literally act exactly like a single organism. Though. So I don't know how you would like square that, but it's it seems like the to me, yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. It seems like a almost spiritualist attempt to like rectify the problem there between between like they're trying to rectify a non-issue, I guess is what I'm saying. Like within the mereological nihilist perspective, there's not really a reason to see any like an organic um, an organic specimen is different from like inorganic specimens, except that sometimes they do weird stuff that inorganic specimens don't. But that's just like entirely inside our brains. That's just how we perceive it. Like it's not weird from the perspective of the broader universe, you know? I don't know.
Well, yeah, the algae point I think is actually quite fascinating. I'm inclined to say, if I understand the organicist position, that like yeah, I mean that colony of algae, I guess you could say, yeah, that does seem more like a composite object to me than the ant colony, for example.
Right, yeah, I could see how you could see an ant colony and say, okay, that's like a bunch of little tiny things. Even though the way they act is really not like other like organic wholes, right? Like like I act as a human. I mean, yeah, like I engage with society or whatever, but like most of the things I do are for me, you know. Whereas like ants will do like totally like, and bees will do they will do things that are like totally like suicidal. They will harm themselves in various ways. They'll do anything for the whole. It's like very like they don't really act like organisms that have like individual minds. But like okay, sure, if you want to leave aside the ants and bees, like algae is like I mean it grows together as like one organic whole, even though theoretically it is a bunch of little organisms. And then similarly, slime molds I think are the most obvious example because like again, some of them literally move around, like which is really creepy to watch. By the way, if you ever have, it's very gross, but whatever. But like they literally like move, like they like crawl around like an organism, but they're not. It's a bunch of little tiny slime mold cells that just do that together.
Yeah, I guess I had I said that my last point was my last point, but I guess I'll say one more
I,
one more thing.
I don't really have anything else to say on it. It just seems
No,
like
that's fair.
a
I
bizarre distinction to make between the not the inorganic and the organic there. I don't really know if you
I mean,
can like square that circle.
like I said, I mean, I think that is, I think it is a bizarre distinction. I guess I don't want to say organicist is inherently spiritualist.
Yeah, no, that's not. I realize
It's
that it's
a
not.
it's a
I just
it,
struggle to find another word for it. I'm sure there's better philosophically
well,
grounded
I mean,
terminology. I'm just a
well, like,
layman, but
well, I mean, it's a metaphysical question just about objects. I mean, do objects exist, and if so, what are the, what is the ultimate properties of objects?
sure.
I think, I mean, this is just a side point. Peter Van Inwagen does happen to be a Christian. I don't think his Christianity and organicism are necessarily correlated. Um, but I can, I don't know. I think I want to move on to a different nihilism, unless you want to talk more about this. But um, okay. Well, this one you'll like more since you're an epistemic anti-realist.
Oh
So
boy.
now we're on to epistemic nihilism. Um, I was worried we wouldn't have enough content, but I think we're doing okay.
Yep.
So, what is epistemic nihilism? Well, this is a quote from an essay by Colin McGinn, um, who is famous for being a what they call a Mysterian, or for supporting Mysterianism with the idea of consciousness. That consciousness is just will just ultimately be a mystery to us. But
Right.
anyway,
Incomprehensible.
yes. But he says about he says epistemic nihilism. It is the thesis that knowledge does not exist. There is no such thing as knowing. All talk of knowledge is so much fiction, reification, and false objectification. Knowledge is like the unicorn, a mythical entity. Epistemic nihilism is to be distinguished from skepticism, which concerns what is known, not the alleged state of knowing itself. Maybe nothing is known or very little, but the concept of knowledge is a concept in good standing. We know what knowledge would be. There is such a state, but we are seldom, if ever, in it. By contrast, the epistemic nihilist holds that the state of knowing is a non-existent state, possibly an incoherent one. We should therefore eliminate the concept from our conceptual schema or keep it only under strict instructions about how it is to be understood. The epistemic nihilist is like the moral nihilist. Both think that the things in question simply lack real existence. There is no such thing as right or wrong, and there is no such thing as knowledge. I mean, another way to put it, I was actually watching a YouTube video last night it's like a debate with someone who claimed to be an epistemic nihilist. But she admitted to not reading much on this topic. And I was a little disappointed. The debate wasn't super philosophically rigorous, but I only bring it up because she was saying she did believe in epistemic reasons, but I'm pretty sure if you're an epistemic nihilist, you can't claim there to be epistemic reasons. I mean, colloquially, we have, reasons for believing things, but they're, in point of fact, in our metaphysics, if you're an epistemic nihilist, you can't appeal to some fact.
Right.
But so that definition does separate skepticism and epistemic nihilism. I'm still not entirely sure what the relationship is between like relativism, skepticism, and epistemic nihilism. I think some do distinguish those three labels. some would say that they're just sort of that relativism and skepticism are flavors of epistemic nihilism. Again, I don't really have a strong opinion on that. But I mean, it's another interesting claim. Again, this episode's all about subversion, basically. And like with moral nihilism, it seems particularly disturbing in a way because we're so used to making knowledge claims. I know what the weather is outside. I know that 2 + 2 = 4, and so on. So it's taking. It is a very radical position. I would have to read more on it. I'm on the face of it, I'm not entirely convinced, but I am curious to hear your opinions.
Modernist.
I'm curious to hear. I'm curious to hear your opinions as an epistemic anti-realist.
Yeah, I mean, sure, we've had versions of this conversation before.
Sure.
I just don't really think that you can because truth is an infinitely definable term, and nobody really seems to have very concrete definitions for it. I mean, people make them, but seems like it's always very challengeable. I don't know. I don't really see how you can lock down a concept of truth. I think that, and I feel the same way about morals. I'm a moral anti-realist and a epistemic anti-realist. Is that truth isn't really a fact out there in the universe. There's not a thing called truth that we can access. There are things which are functionally true for most people, but that's entirely down to our flawed reasoning faculties and our senses, right? We can't really access that in some I don't know. There's not I don't think you can universalize truth generally. There's I think a lot about the party in 1984, right? This is an example I think I've used before, but the people within the party generally, the higher ups, both simultaneously understand that what the party tells them isn't true in the sense that you and I would understand, and also they believe it. To them, what the party says is truth. I can't prove to them using the faculties which are based on our concept of truth. I can't prove to them anymore that they're not that they're wrong. I can't tell them, oh well, the party tells you things that are objectively untrue. And they'll say, yeah, but your truth is not my truth. There's the famous line. I can't remember which gospel that's out of, but it's Jesus is brought before Herod Agrippa as he's going to be crucified, and during the Passion, and they bring him before Herod Agrippa because Pilate doesn't want anything to do with him. Pilate's like, no, I'm not going to be involved in executing a heresiarch. I don't really care about your silly Jewish traditions. Not really my interest. Get him out of here. So they send him off to Herod Agrippa, the Roman client king. Herod says, we both have truths. Are yours the same as mine? Yeah, it's that we don't. I don't think that you can universalize any kind of external truth, because truth, as we understand it, is so based in our own reasoning faculties, which are deeply flawed. I guess that's kind of where I'm at.
So, yeah, I think there's probably a distinction that can be made between saying no knowledge states exist at all, and saying maybe some kind of quasi knowledge states exist, but it's very dependent on culture, or it's very dependent on cognitive structure.
I feel like that's more of where I'm at.
That's what I thought.
That
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to butt in a second ago, but you were giving such a good bit uh, on epistemic anti-realism and nihilism. I didn't want to butt in. I didn't want to interrupt, but like, yeah, like the nihilist position seems a little bit too radical for me. I don't know if I could justify the idea that you literally can't know anything ever. Like, I think within a certain understanding of what knowledge is, you can understand things and you can know things, but I don't know if you can like universalize any kind of knowledge. Really, I guess is kind of where I'm at. So.
Yeah, I mean it's a really interesting question, and one that epistemologists have been batting around for centuries. I don't know. When it comes to something like what would you say?
Give me 5 seconds.
Okay. I mean, so when it comes to like knowledge, I mean, back in the like for a good chunk of the history of like Western philosophy, it's been knowledge has been thought of as like what they call justified true belief. So you believe something, you have proper justification for it, and it happens to be true, right? Of course, that was called into question with what they call Gettier cases, counterexamples where you have a true belief, the belief is justified, but you still lack a kind of knowledge. So there might be a reason to go back to the drawing board and redefine knowledge. I guess like I think so when it comes to something like truth, the concept of truth, I think there's like two kinds of truth that you people could be talking about, and like I think they get confused, and so these conversations are hard to have sometimes. I mean, there's like what I think I would call something like capital T truth or complete objective truth,
Right.
The kind of truth that I guess I don't know God might have say,
Right.
versus like a lower T truth, like a truth that with an asterisk, truth that's more limited. This is why like so everyone misunderstands the scientific method, I feel like. But the nice thing about the scientific method is it's not trying to paint some universal metaphysical picture of how things are. It's basically saying, well, this is our best guess for what things are at the moment. This is our best model, our best picture of what we think the universe is. It could change in the future, but this is what we got right now.
Right.
So when it comes to like a more like a truth with an asterisk, I see no reason to throw out that concept altogether. David Lewis has a good paper called Elusive Knowledge, where he advocates a kind of like epistemic contextualism, where it's like, okay, so if I'm in a physics lab, I'm not going to question that I know that matter exists. Right, I'm assuming matter exists so I can run my experiments, so I can do my calculations. Right. If I'm in a philosophy seminar, perhaps I can't assume that matter exists, because I'm instead of doing instead of doing experiments, I'm trying to get at the foundation of reality, and so I might say, well, I can't prove that matter exists. Maybe the only thing that's real is mind or something. Right. So it's like you're doing it's different contexts where you're doing different things. Are you focused on more contingent truths, the contingent truths of the physical world, or are you trying to get at some ultimate reality?
I gotta read that because I love reading things that just like agree with me. It's great. No, but I mean, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, right? Like there are things that you kind of have to accept as true to function in society. And like if you don't do that, then like you're gonna lose your mind, and you're not going. It's not productive to um, like you're on the road, right? And you come to a stop. You come to a stoplight. You're not going to get anywhere by arguing with the officer over whether or not it was red. It was red. Like you need to be able to accept that regardless of whatever like philosophical woo woo you want to engage in, like the there are things that people like what's the term? Intersubjective claims about the world, which are functionally true, and so you accept those because like not accepting those makes you a useless actor in the world. Basically, you will get nowhere in life by doing that. Um,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
at
I
the
don't think.
same time, like like it's valuable, I think, to interrogate the nature of truth in more of a like abstracted sense, because you it, I, I'm trying to something I'm trying to get at here.
Well,
As is often the
I have a thought
case.
while you're thinking.
Yeah.
What, so I guess we've coined this term "truth" with an asterisk now, so I'll just go with it. But I think I'm not sure I would say "truth" with an asterisk isn't entirely just like based on, say, social rules, for example. I mean, if you think about the fact that, I don't know, we were able to send men to the moon, just for example, or we're able to build rockets, we're able to build cars, or
What are you
something.
talking about? That never happened, bro.
um,
I think we
I,
need to have a moon truth episode. I just come out
yes,
like
yes,
actually never happened.
Conspiracy
No,
theories are
no,
fun to talk about, but
I'm not actually a moon
well,
truther. I'm sorry to say.
my point is more putting aside the fact that the moon landing was fake, assuming it's fake. It's not
Correct,
fake.
correct. It was fake.
Um, I think there's just enough empirical evidence that we are able to manipulate um, materials, manipulate objects, manipulate the world, in a phrase, to where I feel like there is some connection, there is some correspondence between truth and asterisks and the world as such. Now that might not be a full that not be a full endorsement of the correspondence theory of truth.
Right.
Um, maybe something more pragmatic. This is my issue with like American pragmatism. Is like I'm not a big fan of American pragmatism because I don't like the idea that what's useful is true.
Yeah.
Like Jordan Peterson will say this about religion. Religion is useful in the to uh, I don't know. But
Right. Yeah.
religion is useful to deal with your psychological demons, which we can conceptualize as
Kind of slay your
devils.
chaos dragon or
But
whatever.
like, so like, I get somewhat frustrated with that idea. I feel like something could be completely useful without being true. Um, but having said that, I think I do tend to all my kicking and screaming aside, I tend to fall back onto a kind of pragmatic idea. Well, it's kind of true and it kind of works, and that's good enough. So I don't know. I don't want to go full. I don't think I'm willing to go full skeptic, because I do think like the scientific method is a good way at getting at something. I guess we can say we can I mean I guess if, someone doesn't want to call it truth, I guess they don't have to. But
Right.
so
Yeah. No. I think the scientific method is a great like test for the sort of epistemic anti-realist perspective, right? Like I look at the scientific method, I'm like, it gives us information that within most sane people's understanding of what truth is, it gives us useful information. It might as well be true, but
well, I
I
think it
don't know if I
depends.
can
Though.
like
It
I don't know if
depends.
I can like universalize it. Again, I use the example of people within the party in 1984, right? Like if if something the scientific method brought us contradicted what the party said, to them it wouldn't be true, and so it's like I can't like break them out of that perspective because they're so locked into it. They have just a totally different like conception of the world. This is more to do with moral anti-realism, but I've brought up the example of the movie Country No Country for Old Men. Great film. Anybody who's not seen it, go see it. And anything I'm about to say, I'm just going to tell you the plot of it. So sorry, but uh, um, the uh, uh, the villain of that film, right? He his entire like way of deciding whether he's going to kill somebody, he just walks up and flips a coin, right? And if the coin lands, I forget. He tells you to call it. Actually, he does actually let you call it, which gives you some, I guess, within his framework, a kind of agency within the process. It's really bizarre, but and then if you don't win the coin toss, then he shoots you. Sad. You hate to see it happen, but like when he gets interrogated towards the end of the film, like he doesn't. There's not like he's not insane, right? Like his way of understanding the world is just fundamentally different from the rest of society. Like he doesn't like the way he interacts with the world does not indicate that he's like crazy. Like he understands the world, for lack of a better word, rationally. His underlying understanding of what morality is and what morality means is so fundamentally divorced from the rest of society that our society can't really deal with him. And so the solution of the movie is kind of yeah, you have to like basically drop a rock on that person. Like not literally, they lock him away. I don't think he's like executed, but like the point is like that's just a person who's like, from our perspective, even though they are rationally thinking, like we just can't like deal with them. There's not really an argument to be had there. It's not. There's no like fact out in the universe that you can use to disprove them, epically own them, facts and logic, whatever. Like you just have to remove them completely from society because they cannot interact with our society safely. It's not doable. And this is kind of like and I think this kind of applies to truth as well. Truth is in a very similar way, like kind of an inaccessible thing like morals. We don't really have like a way of assessing what truth is outside of like these socially constructed methods of getting at something that kind of approximates truth, like the scientific method, right? Like if somebody just rejects that out of hand, I can't like prove that to them. There's no underlying reality that I can say, well, you have to accept this because X, Y, and Z. Like they ultimately just have a different conception of what truth is. And I just have to say, okay, well, I think your conception of truth is stupid and we need to remove you from society. Like, sorry. It's like.
So, yeah, you touched on a lot there. I guess I'll make a couple.
I did,
points.
I know.
No, you're fine.
I bounced around a lot.
So, well, when it comes to scientific method, I mean, part of it depends on like one's philosophy of science, right? Because if one's a scientific realist, then one does believe that the world that science is talking about exists
right
independent of the
outside of
mind.
us.
So genes exist outside our conception of them. Electrons exist outside our conception of them. That's one perspective on the scientific method. You can also be a scientific anti-realist. Like you could be what they call an instrumentalist, which I think argues that, it's a useful tool, but it doesn't really tell us the truth about reality. So there's that. And then the other thing you mentioned, I mean, partly what you seem to be touching on is sort of this relativism idea. But I think we got to distinguish between. So just because there are different morals out there across like cultures or across individuals, that doesn't in and of itself demonstrate that there isn't any moral truth. all it does is say people have different morals. So it could be possible. I mean, just to take a silly example, I have different morals than, I don't know, the Taliban. Like it could be possible. It could be possible theoretically that the Taliban have the correct morals. That'll be clipped and shipped,
Sure.
but it could be like in principle possible that they have the correct moral system, and I'm just wrong.
Right.
So that's where I guess sometimes I get frustrated with people bringing up moral relativism. I mean, there's the obvious point that everyone agrees with, that morals differ between cultures and individuals.
Right. Yeah.
And then there's the question of moral truth, which is slightly separate. But
Yeah, I mean, this is where I arrive at like almost the kind, that's why I use the killing with the rock as kind of my metaphor, right? Like if the Taliban were here in America trying to change our society to have their morals, I would say we should kill them with a rock. It's like they just have a fundamentally different perspective on the world. I'm not going to argue the Taliban out of their perspective. Their perspective's just dumb, and I don't like it. You get to a point where it's like my perspective. I'm a utilitarian. I want people to believe things that make them do good stuff. The things that the Taliban believe make them do bad stuff. We should kill them. Moving on. There's not. They have a fundamentally different understanding of the world, and that's all fine and great, except it's not, because I'm not a relativist. I don't think that because I can't prove them factually wrong in a moral sense, that means that they have equivalent morals to me. I think my morals are just better because they have better outcomes. Similarly, this is how I feel very much about truth claims, right? The people in 1984 are not wrong in a factual sense that I can prove outside of the obviously flawed rationality and scientific method and things that the tools that we use within our rational minds to understand whatever we call truth, right? I think our truth is just better. The truth that those people have is leading them to an awful totalitarian society. It's bad. We should kill them. Moving on. There's not I can't argue with them, so there's nothing else to be said. Remove them. That's all there is to do. Again, I don't think you literally have to kill everyone who has bad ideas. That's my metaphor for saying you can't allow them any meaningful power in society. Whatever that takes, you should remove them from any power. And somebody like the villain of No Country for Old Men, yeah, you should probably lock them away forever because they are literally just a menace. But there's levels to this depending on the level of harm. Again, utilitarianism, right? But the general idea can't allow these people to have any meaningful power in society because our beliefs are just better than theirs.
I think an analogy is kind of it involves the free will debate. I mean, even if I don't know, what was that guy's name? Dylan Roof, the one who shot up a black church years ago. Even if Dylan Roof doesn't have free will, I still think he should be locked up and prevented. Or I guess
it doesn't matter to me.
But so you should, whether or not we ultimately have free will in a metaphysical sense, that doesn't invalidate the criminal justice system because we want to remove those antisocial individuals from the social body. Well, this might be a good time to talk about political nihilism. Actually, I won't have a lot to say about political nihilism, but it is another kind of nihilism out there that I wanted to touch on. So, political nihilism is a movement. It actually originated in Tsarist Russia. No shocker there, because it was because there was a response to rigid social structures and the authoritarianism of the Tsar. And so the political nihilist seeks to dismantle oppressive and arbitrary institutions, and as well as arbitrary or oppressive social norms, in favor of greater individual autonomy. There's like a sort of connection here with anarchism, I think, and the nihilists in Russia did resort to like violent means. They would resort to terrorism, for example, as a way of, in the hopes of bringing about like radical social
propaganda of the deed, I suppose they would call that.
And yeah, so I mean, this isn't I would struggle to say there's a positive program to the political nihilist. It's more about, let's just get rid of all the bad stuff, and not, we don't really want to put something in its place necessarily, because that might also be arbitrary
Right.
and bad and wrong. So yeah, I mean, it's almost purely a negative thesis. We don't like what currently exists, what the political structures and norms that currently exist.
Only the petty bourgeois could come up with such a brilliant political perspective. Sorry. But yeah, that's like, I mean, what is there to say about that? It's like, yeah, my political position is that I basically don't have ideas. Like, okay, that's great. Moving on. Like, this is why I think political nihilism never really caught on. It's like, what do you do with that antithesis? Like, okay, great. Like, then I guess we'll never do anything ever. Let's just live under capitalist or Tsarist or whatever terror forever. That sounds great. Thank you. Moving on. Like, you can't, like the thinking is like, oh well, we'll get rid of that stuff, but then it's like, you don't have anything beyond that. So like, what's the point? You just,
it almost echoes
non-argument.
It almost echoes a sort of quietism in a way, but
Yes.
it seems a little bit different from quietism in that the quietist isn't going to go out and like bomb government buildings. They're just going to say, I'm going to, let the world do its own thing. I'm going to go on to my Epicurean commune with my friends and do what I want, basically.
I mean, it's kind of like it's almost like the reverse side of the quietist perspective. It's the same logic of the quietist perspective. It's just, I'm going to do a bunch of like violent shit for no reason though. Like, it's like, well, that's great. That's really awesome, dude. I'm glad you like bombed a school. Like, I'm glad you went out swinging at least. Like, what was the point of that? Like this is one of the, I suppose, fundamental disagreements between anarchist and Marxist perspectives. And I don't want to conflate the anarcho-nihilists with anarchism generally, because anarchism generally is, a little bit more constructed. But like the nihilist perspective is like, I think almost the nexus of the kind of anarchist perspective. It's not nexus. That's not the right word. It's like it's almost a logical endpoint for that kind of thinking, though. It's the Marxists really don't like that. They're like, no, that's stupid adventurism. You're just killing people for funsies. Like, it does nothing for leftist political movements. It only makes us look like insane psycho killers. Which, to be fair, that is kind of what you're doing as a political nihilist.
Yeah, I mean of course, who Max Stirner was.
Yes.
That the political nihilism also makes me think
of
someone like Max Stirner, who wrote what was it called, The Ego in Its Own, I think, or The Unique in Its Property. It's translated in different ways, but kind of precursor to postmodernism, I guess. Like, Stirner was like, I'm not part of a political party. I'm not this. I'm not that. I focus on me. I am the universe, in a sense. I am the world. And rejecting state, rejecting church, rejecting nations or whatnot. It's me. That's what we should focus on. We should focus on, that is sort of almost the
Another very
fundamental
proto-Randian thinker.
parts of reality, in some sense, are just us on this view. And you know, we whatever we can do in our power is what we should do, basically. We shouldn't cling to some overarching ideology. It's
Which
you
is
know,
ironic because
he calls these
egoism is a kind of overarching ideology. But
he calls these overarching ideologies or institutions like spooks. Which
yes,
I think is also a slur, but
it's got an anti-Semitic origin. Yeah. And then, perhaps, unsurprisingly, Kropotkin and the anarchists picked up on that term, and they liked to use it a lot back in the day.
Well, yeah, and
for anti-Semitic reasons.
And,
I won't split any hairs about that. Kropotkin and friends were
sure. I mean, Bakunin was also, the great anarchist Bakunin was also a massive
Bakunin was the other person I was thinking. I couldn't conjure up his name for some reason, but yeah.
And he hated Marx, and Marx hated him. And Stirner, I mean, Marx and Engels knew Stirner. I mean, they made fun of him. I think I forget what book it was, but they do confront Stirner's ideas, which are very different than. I mean, Stirner was not interested in like, you know, being part of the proletarian revolution.
Yeah.
In fact, his arguments and ideas sort of go against that very idea. So it makes sense that Marx and Engels would want to respond to that, because he's kind of undermining their project in some sense. But yeah, so there's political nihilism. There's not much to say about it. There's one more nihilism I have on my list.
All of the nihilisms.
All of the nihilisms. And this is cosmic nihilism. So it's kind of connected to what we talked about at the beginning with existential nihilism. But so cosmic nihilism, it asserts that the universe as a whole is like unintelligible, and it's completely indifferent to like human concerns. The picture of the universe is one of that's like chaotic and probably lacking any definable features or meaning. I mean, some cosmic nihilists will concede, well, we can understand small parts of the universe, like maybe scientists can understand certain parts of the universe. But there's still some, but they would still maintain there's something about the universe that is just beyond our comprehension. And they're quick to emphasize, we're just specks of dust in this vast space.
Very 15-year-old kind of perspective.
and some cosmic nihilists would go so far as to say, well, I mean, not only is the universe indifferent to us, it's actually actively hostile to us. Not saying the universe is like has feelings of hostility, but that it's a hostile place for life to exist in. So yeah, again, I mean, connects somewhat with existential nihilism, connects somewhat with epistemic nihilism. Yeah.
So there you go, guys. Your suicidal ideation is actually philosophical thinking.
Well, no, I mean, I think you're being.
I'm being very silly right now.
Doing a bit there, but
I am doing a bit.
Well, it reminds me of. I keep saying stuff reminds me of other stuff, but there's a good book. So Emil Soren, I think is how you pronounce it.
The Trouble with Being Born.
The Trouble with Being Born. He was, I believe, he was originally from Romania, but I think at some point he packed up, moved to France, and wrote most of his works in French. So he was known mainly in his life as like a French intellectual. But anyway, I mean, I bring it up because I I think Surin has kind of a cosmic nihilist perspective. There's something, there's almost, it's like living is almost like a curse in a way, um, and yeah, I mean, I'm trying to see if there's any interesting. And he also, like Nietzsche, he wrote in aphorisms. I'm trying to see if there's any like telling aphorisms from him. Um, well, I don't have anything off. I can't find anything off the top of my head, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think like there's an aspect of cosmic nihilism that I think I would more or less agree with. I mean, I don't think. I mean, it's fair to say we're in a universe that doesn't that disregards human affairs.
I mean, it disregards everything. It's not a
And
conscious entity, so that doesn't.
well, no,
I don't know if that's really a meaningful
no,
claim.
no. Well, no, well, we want to be careful here. It's not about we're not. It's not about personifying or anthropomorphizing the universe.
I mean, that's pretty personifying language, though.
No.
That's, I mean, that is like you can't really get around that. That is personifying language, whether or not it's hostile to human affairs. Like you can't really, like now. I mean, I get it might be a metaphor, but the language itself is personifying.
It's the idea. I mean, it's kind of like. I mean, it's kind of like anti-natalism in a way. Excuse me. I mean, it's like
That was actually what I was thinking.
The idea that we shouldn't reproduce because suffering is bad, and you won't suffer if you don't exist. I mean, so like that's I think the kind of perspective you got to take. It's not about putting aside how we would characterize the language. It's not saying the universe is consciously hostile to us or the universe is consciously ignoring us. It is more that it is a universe without some. I mean, I keep going back to this idea of God, I guess, but I mean, and okay, well, yeah, I mean that might contrast it well.
I mean, that kind of requires a God. If you want a universe that cares about our affairs, it would have to have a God.
Well, I would put it like, well, I guess I'd put it like this. I mean, if some people throughout history have taken like a sort of a Leibnizian perspective of like, well, the universe created by God is overall, when all is said and done, and all the all the math has been not all the math, but all the moral calculus has been performed. Like the universe is good, right? Living is good, existence is good,
right? But Leibnizian believed in God, so
God knows what he's doing. That's what I think so again, we don't want to get hanged up on the language so much as that's I guess the contrast of a godless universe is supposedly doesn't care about you in the way that like a universe with a God would, if we believe that God has a cosmic plan for us. And so that's what I mean about like the aspect of cosmic nihilism that's not just an edgy 15-year-old edgy depressed 15-year-old. It's an acknowledgement of a post-God world, or a world where we might not turn to religion anymore for comfort, and so in that sense the universe is like cold or
sure. I mean, I don't even. That seems like an almost non-philosophical perspective. But that's so like. I mean, that's just like kind of downstream of the atheist perspective. Like people try. I guess this is just like. I do kind of view like perspectives other than this, because this perspective is just like extremely obvious to me. Like I sometimes forget that there are people who actually like write philosophical tracts on this. But it's yeah, like because there are still like atheists, especially like the humanist variety, who will like try to ascribe like meaning to life in the universe, and it's like I mean without like external forces to the obviously unconscious universe. Like we're all adults here. I assume we all have the perspective that the universe is not a conscious entity unless you are religious. You can't really like you can't describe it like having meaning to people. Like it doesn't. It cannot care about our affairs without an external entity. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah,
This
that's
is where
sort
you
of
get into like
that's sort of
astrology and shit, which I hate.
that's sort of
Um,
that's sort of that's sort of what I was thinking. I mean, I think the reason people write treatises, to begin with, is people talk about the meaning of life, and we
right.
feel like either we feel like our lives are meaningful or we want them to be meaningful. And so some people will look for some sort of justification for that. And this is, of course, why, tying it back to the beginning with the existentialists, that's why they're emphasizing our freedom and our ability to make our own choices. But the other thing I was thinking of is like, I'm not even sure what it would mean. Like, I'm not sure I can conceptualize a meaningful universe as such. I guess I don't know.
Right. Yeah. No.
Maybe this is just from me feeling like meaning is just in the head. But like,
right.
So yeah, there's something to what you're saying, I guess, about for there to be meaning in the universe, there would have to be a external being the external being that we have some meaningful relationship with.
Right.
But it does make me think. So I wonder. I'm gonna just try this on for size, see what you think. But so Alex O'Connor, the YouTuber, Cosmic Skeptic, not yeah. He has an interesting video. I think I told you about it actually. He and he's also a moral anti-realist.
Yeah.
And he says not only is moral realism not true in a world without God, it wouldn't even be true in a world with God, because and his idea is, well, then we're just appealing to God's authority. But what gives God that authority, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. Now I'm thinking like, well, if we follow that,
overly.
Well, then hold on.
I feel like that's a.
Let me finish. I'm almost done. I promise.
Sorry.
To some extent, I can understand that perspective because, like, well, if we think of what God commands of us, say, if there is a God, or if there was a God, you could sort of see from the perspective of, well, that's God's own subjective judgment. Why should I care about God's subjective judgment? And so, like, it makes me think about even like in the context of meaning, I guess. Would it be a meaningless universe even if there was a God? Because again, it's just another example of subjective meaning. And why should I assume if God has some plan for me? Why should I assume it's a good plan? Why should I care? Sort of thing. So anyway, I'm just I'll let you respond now. But that
sure. Like, I basically agree with that perspective. I just think like it boils down to your definition of what morals and truth are. This is where you wind up, right? I know it sucks. This is always word games, but welcome to it.
I thought you were going to do the Petersonian thing. It depends what you mean by God.
Depends on what you mean by yeah. I know. I'm sorry. I disappointed. I really could have done that there, huh? It depends on what you mean by God. But my Peterson impression is not as good as yours, unfortunately. But no, like if you have. Divine command theory is one of the oldest and most basic, like, generalizing theories of what morality is that there are, right? But like it's, from my perspective, it's deeply flawed. But I can't I can't disprove people who believe it. I just think they're dumber and worse. So that is what it is. But yeah, like if we lived in a universe where God did exist, then I would. Assuming that I still held the frameworks that I work within now, yeah, I would say, yeah, it's still just subjective. It's not an objective morality. I think the problem with expanding that to cosmic meaning is that if God designed the universe with intention, then the universe has intention. And if he designed it with the understanding that we would exist within it, and he wanted to make it so that we could exist within it, then it does have meaning. So, because meaning is a thing inside your head, right? Like, whereas when we're talking about moral
Well,
facts,
that's the question.
we are trying to find something outside of us, which I don't believe exists.
Well,
I don't know if any of that gobbledygook made any sense, but
I mean, whether meaning or not is whether the meaning or not is in our head or is the question. I mean, I think it probably
right.
That's
the meaning would be within God's head then, so it wouldn't be within our head.
Sure.
That would be meaning God is ascribing to His creation within that framework, which I suppose, in a sense, to us is an external meaning, but to Him is not. If I suppose, because it's inside His head. He's the one who made that meaning.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like, if I want to be relativist about it. I mean, why? I'm trying to think. It's kind of like, so it reminds me of, I keep saying it reminds me of, this is my catchphrase on the podcast apparently, but so the argument about the death of the author, so the Roland Barthes idea of so you go from the traditional idea of the author is inscribing meaning to the text, and our goal is to try to figure out, okay, what was the author's intention, and that's the meaning. And then it's the idea of, okay, no, get rid of that. It doesn't matter what the author intended.
Meaning is transmitted at the point.
What matters is how I personally, or you personally, what matters is how the reader interprets the text.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, like, and this is all hypothetical. It's not super important since neither of us are a believer. But I mean, if God created the universe with a purpose, a purpose, that's in His head, or her head, to be inclusive. But why couldn't I say, like with a written text, I could say, well, no, I just interpret the universe differently. And so there's still not any inherent objective meaning to the text.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like the meaning is external to us. So in that sense, I suppose you like. Oh, I see what you're saying. That is a problem, huh? I don't know. It's not a problem for me because I'm not a religious person, but it is an interesting question.
I guess what I'm thinking about is like, well, it could be possible that in principle there couldn't be any inherent meaning to any universe.
Sure.
I'm putting forward the possibility. I'm not saying it's necessarily true. But.
No, that's that. I suppose that does make sense. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I like believe in when we're talking about text, because this does touch on a lot of things I do, as it turns out. Sure. I tend to be kind of interested anyway in the author's intention, regardless of I don't know if like an author's intention inscribes inherent meaning in it. I don't know if you can really if that means anything. like what an inherent meaning is. Meaning is always just a thing that's like inside our brains. I don't know if you can really get past that, but I still find myself trying to argue from author's intention because it's still useful, even like if the author's intention isn't like some ultimate dictating force in what the meaning of the text is. Again, whatever the hell meaning means. Nobody's ever found a good definition for me, so I'm waiting still on that one. But whatever that is, right? Like, I feel like your understanding of a text should still, in some way, be informed by the author's intention, if you can get at that at all. Just because, I mean, otherwise you're just kind of like making shit up, which is fine. And sometimes it's fun to do papers where you just take a text and say, "This is what I think about it," and then you just write that, and that can be really interesting and fun. I'm a lit crit guy. I love doing that shit. But to get a really useful meaning out of a text, I think you have to, on some level, interrogate the author's intent. Otherwise, you're just kind of swimming in a sea of everyone's feelings, which is something that we do sometimes. But it's if you're trying to derive something more than that, you kind of have to, in some way, integrate the author's intent.
I guess the issue is useful in what sense, though, or useful for who?
Sure,
You know,
yeah.
like my subjective interpretation of The Catcher in the Rye, for example, it could be very useful to me. It could have
Sure.
nothing to do with what J.D. Salinger meant. But I mean, I think in more or less, I'm in. I mean, I think there could be value in interpreting a text without the author in mind and with the author in mind. I don't,
Right, yeah.
but both can be of value at different moments for different purposes.
I'm a philologist, so I do have to, unfortunately, be boring sometimes and be like, okay, so it's very fun to talk about like Plautus and the art of reading and like how like reading and improvisation play with one another, but like here's what Plautus was probably talking about. I I do have to be the fun sponge occasionally.
Sure.
But I do also like doing things that don't do that. But I did a paper back last fall where I talked about like the problems of trying to derive an author's intent from, especially from ancient sources where it's not
Yeah.
like any of us was around to talk to him. Well, except maybe David Christensen. He might have been around. But um, but no. I mean, seriously though, like you wind up with a lot of problems with that, and like trying to divine an author's intention from sometimes fragmentary sources. It's very, very interesting, I think. But anyway,
Well, we've been talking about nihilism for a while now. I've gone through my list.
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, nihilism is. I guess I get maybe to provide some kind of concluding thoughts. I think I'm sympathetic to some kinds of nihilism, existential nihilism, cosmic nihilism. A little skeptical of epistemic nihilism. Moral nihilism, again, more sympathetic to. So I mean, there's value in thinking about nihilism and in studying nihilism.
sure.
I guess there's a question of like, can you live like a nihilist?
It seems like almost no nihilist actually thinks that you can. When you talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, I mean, like it's a fun like idea, and it's how I think, but like I have to live as a person in the world." So
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, for one, it could like nihilism could be true, but we could all still have deeply held beliefs about everything.
yeah,
The two could be distinguished. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this is why in the past I've been more sympathetic to existentialism. I think the older I get, I'm becoming a bit more absurdist in my thinking. But like, there's nothing inherently wrong with like, I don't know, getting drunk with your friends sometimes. Like, there's no inherent meaning to any of it.
right.
It's fun, or it's really, or like, I don't know. I mean, I could
Almost a
see.
hedonistic perspective.
Well, not just that. I mean, I could see value. I could see why people want to go to church, even if there's no God listening to their prayers. I mean, I can understand, like, I can empathize. Like, well, I could see where they're getting meaning from that. Well, we can talk about that another time. We can debate that another time. But I mean, like, I could see that, or if you're living out a philosophy of life, I could see where you're getting the value, whether or not it's actually true.
Sure.
So, I mean, to that extent, you might want to say, well, we can't live as nihilists. But I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have in the back of your mind. It's a good thing to reflect on, and like, it's a good tool to question assumptions and prejudices.
Sure. I mean, that's why I wind up with anti-realist perspectives on a lot of things. But the nihilist perspective, in most regards, always feels a little bit, just a smidge too radical for me to
Epistemic
really
nihilism.
take. Yeah. It's like I don't know if I can like say, oh well, nothing is ever true in any way. Like I don't know. It feels like like I think the epistemic one is really the root of all my other problems, right? It's like how do you like nothing is ever true. I mean, I tend to think things aren't capital T true if we want to use that kind of terminology. But it's like, is it like not true? Period. Like, I don't know. I mean, within our intersubjective ideas of what's true, things can be very easily true. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, epistemic nihilism, I think, is connected. If it's not radical skepticism, it's at least deeply connected with radical
Right.
skepticism. Because like
Yeah.
if you look at like the ancient skeptics, that could be an episode all on its own, right? As well. I mean, you have the academics who are like who are asserting we cannot know anything, but they're these truth-like things that work for us, and so we're gonna go with that. Whereas like you have the Pyrrhonian skeptics, the more radical ones that are like, you can't even assert that we can't know anything, so we should suspend judgment. And then there's like stories that are probably apocryphal of like Pyro. Um, Supposedly, like he never looked both ways crossing the street because he was suspending judgment of whether or not like carts were in the road, and so his friends were like preventing him from like falling off cliffs and like helping him cross the street because he didn't care.
No, that's definitely real. That's a real thing that nihilists do in their real lives.
Well, it's an illustration of his philosophy, and it was
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
he just love to do this. I
it
think they came
makes
up with
sense if you take like, but that's exactly why I'm saying there's no way that's true, because it's like no one lives like that. Like yeah, it makes sense. Like if you were to run like nihilist perspectives out to totally absurdist logical
Well, I'm talking about
conclusions, but
Pyrrhonian
it's like,
skepticism, but yeah. Um, yeah, no, I mean that's a. I mean, I think the ancients did this a lot. I think they came up with stories about
yeah,
philosophers as a way of like illustrating their philosophy, even if the story like was just made up.
right. It's
um,
interesting to me. They say that myth may well be the sort of locus classicus for all other related fields in the humanities, and philosophy definitely draws on myth a lot. But I think it's interesting. You get oftentimes these like daughter fields of myth kind of create their own myth surrounding the major figures within them. You get people like Cairo and you know such and such. Drama's the same way, of course. There's a story about how Menander, he supposedly he had a play that he was supposed to be putting on in a few days, and his friend asked him if he had the comedy in order, and he was like, yeah, I've got it written. I just need to like put verses to it, which of course is absurd if you know how poetry is written, because you have to have theoretically you have to have um, uh, uh, the why can I not think of words? The meter. You have to have meter before you can actually write the thing. But the point being made, of course, is that Menander was big on plots and didn't really care that much about meter, except insofar as it was kind of required of his genre. But yeah, I just think that kind of thing is really funny with the ancients. They did love doing that, and really that happens with modern figures too.
oh sure.
But yeah,
Um,
sometimes people just say a thing that sounds too good, and so it just kind of sticks, I guess.
yeah, or people having inflated reputations. I don't know. There's so many like mythical stories about like someone like Mother Teresa, and then you actually look at the real person, and you're like, she wasn't actually a legitimate person.
Don't get me started on Mother Teresa.
Okay, I didn't. Okay.
That's just like a depressing story. That one's
No,
not
it
even
is.
funny. She's just like purely evil. It's just like
Um,
anybody in the audience who doesn't know, just like look at her Wikipedia page. It's like everything
it's
you know
not
about
great.
her is wrong. She's just like evil, just an awful human. who is definitely in hell right now. So that's all I have to say about Mother Teresa.
And yeah, I mean, not only was her actions evil, but we found out when she died and people like published her letters or whatever, she could never actually believe any of the stuff she preached to begin with. So not only was she,
Yeah, I think that's like the craziest part.
She was
Not
a
just that
hypocrite.
she was like a she wasn't just like embezzling funds for the Vatican and doing evil shit and taking reproductive health care away from people. Like she wasn't just like a there's a lot of people who do things I would consider to be evil within my, moral framework, but
they still believe in something.
She didn't even believe in any of it. She's just like evil.
Yeah.
She was doing evil shit for the love of the game. You almost have to respect it. like damn, she was really just on like the supervillain grind set.
Yeah, well, I think it's like I think this happens a lot with some religious people. Like they're trying so hard to believe just because they can't ultimately. So they'll go to church.
They feel guilty about not believing, so then they do insane stuff to prove to themselves that they believe. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
This is why religion's brain poison.
But so on the note of myths, that's very nihilist of us to reduce most things to myths. So we're embodying the ethos of today's podcast.
Sure.
But we're almost at 2 hours, so I did not think we were going to make it 2 hours on nihilism, but we did. I don't know if you have any final parting thoughts on it, but
no. Just stay skeptical, I guess.
Moderate. I think we're advocating for a moderate kind of nihilism, not complete nihilism, just a little bit.
I'm an anti-realist, not a nihilist. That's my.
Nihilism is like alcohol. A little bit goes a long way. All right. Well, on that note, I guess we'll close up shop for the day, and we'll have another episode next week on some classical topic. Maybe we'll touch on Roman comedy since we missed that last episode, but that'll be for Will to decide. So thank you for listening, everyone, and take care.